legislation shortly after. So it's still a very scary situation up there. Universal access is the official position, but chain of supply is very difficult. Getting stuff through regularly on time and to everybody is just plain difficult in PNG, even in town. And then the other big thing is compliancy. People just cannot be guaranteed to be taking every dose every day when they should. So viral resistance and all those sort of things are chronic issues. The big thing that Helen's death brought back to me was the base level of what I can only call superstition in PNG. And it's a really strong word, but there's a new church up there which she joined, and to continue taking your antiretrovirals whilst attending the church is not showing a full commitment to the healing power of God. Therefore, if you wish to attend that church, you have to give up your antiretrovirals. Helen was the treatments officer for IGAT Hope, the AIDS Council, the level of the AIDS Council here. The treatments officer for an AIDS organisation joined the church and gave up her drugs and died, leaving a 2-year-old daughter and several other family members. Now, if we can't get Helen to comply with her treatments, how the hell are we going to get anybody else to? So personally, that's what I took away from PNG. There are more people being openly positive, and there are still people fighting hard, which is good. The other stream that I popped in and out of was the IDU, the intravenous drug using stream. And their highlight was the launch of a new film, Through the Eye of the Needle. Again, a peer-based education film around HIV and drug use. It's very interesting, but it was interesting to hear the MC there talk about the thrill she got walking down the quayside towards this enormous big marquee all lit up with a big sign with bright lights saying Through the Eye of the Needle, premiere tonight. And to have that level of exposure out in public, just how important that was for the IDU community and what a boost it was for those people in their self-esteem and their efficacy. So that reminded me that even within Australia, we still have those pockets of stigma, discrimination, blame, all the rest of it. The last thing I'd like to mention is the march at the end. I had a great time. It was very interesting that 20 years later I was holding up a sign saying silence equals death, exactly what I've held up in Sydney and Canberra on many occasions in the 80s and 90s, and Rob is nodding. You'll see a lovely picture of Rob on the slideshow holding up a silence equals death poster and banner. So we're still using the same slogans, but then again we're still holding up peak hour traffic in Melbourne, and that was really cool. And the candlelight memorial at the end of it was really pretty. It was nice. It was quiet, it was respectful, the band was good, and the candles just looked really amazing. So, as a long-term HIV positive person, that was my experience of the conference. Free for any questions afterwards or chat about anything, and hope to talk to you later.
Thank you, Ken, again for your, I think, wise experience in this field, and certainly someone who's had a lot of involvement with the council and continues to. I think this is a nice transition to someone at the slightly different spectrum age cohort, our second speaker, and be able to see the different perspectives in what they saw or came from the conference. I now warmly like to introduce Zoya Patel. Zoya is the Communications and Advocacy Officer from the YWCA Canberra, one of Canberra's oldest women's organisations. She attended attended the International AIDS Conference as part of the World YWCA delegation and as the recipient of the Australian Scholarship. Please now warmly welcome Zoya.
Significantly shorter than everyone else, so I'll just try and put this down. I got it. Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. As Nathan said, I work at YWCA Canberra as Communications and Advocacy Officer there. For those who don't know, YWCA Canberra is a community-based not-for-profit organisation, and we deliver 28 quality programs in the areas of women's leadership, community services and children's services in the Canberra community. We're also part of a global movement that's present in 125 countries and is represented at the international level by World YWCA. And at that level, World YWCA does a lot of work in the HIV/AIDS space, specifically around sexual health education and prevention methods. I was very fortunate to be awarded a scholarship through YWCA Australia to attend AIDS 2014 as part of the World YWCA delegation. Our delegation was made up of 21 women from 15 countries, many of whom are HIV positive, and all of whom work to support HIV positive women in their communities. And our goal for the conference was to learn more about the impact of HIV on women globally and to represent the views of young women living positively with HIV wherever we could. For me personally, it was quite a learning experience. I haven't had a lot of interaction in this space before, so I felt very privileged to be able to have access to a lot of young women who had been working in that space and had been living with HIV. On Monday, July 20, which was the first official day of AIDS 2014, Dr. Lydia Mungerera from Uganda said, "I think the face of the pandemic is a female face." Increasingly, this is becoming more evident. Rates of HIV are growing steadily in young women aged 15 to 25 globally, and women account for 59% of infections in sub-Saharan Africa, which is also the region with the highest rates of HIV infection globally. Not only are women disproportionately affected by HIV infection, but factors such as violence against women, a lack of economic independence, and the continuing issues of stigma and discrimination around HIV generally result in significantly lower social, economic, and health outcomes for HIV-positive women across the world. As Jennifer Gapsy-Mallet stated on the second day of AIDS 2014, it's imperative that women are given leadership positions in addressing the AIDS epidemic. That's the most integral way of breaking down stigma and gender discrimination around HIV. And that's an issue that I feel is epitomised in the values and priorities of World YWCA. A key priority for World YWCA is promoting and securing the sexual and reproductive health and rights of young women across the world, and specifically preventing HIV infection through proactive sexual health education and the promotion of the female condom. Definitely at the AIDS 2014, there was a lot of information about female condoms and a lot of excellent artwork at the Global Village using condoms as the main material, so that was fantastic. But importantly, World YWCA and a lot of the organisations present here today and at the conference really do provide a space for people living with HIV to share their stories and experience, which I think is integral to lowering stigma and discrimination, and also making sure that people like me who haven't been able to interact with that space have a very personal introduction to the issues that they face. I was really humbled throughout the conference by the strength and resilience shown by people living positively with HIV. The stories I heard from delegates from across the world and also from right here in Australia were often confronting. Sometimes they were distressing, but they were always moving. One story that particularly struck me was that of Sylvia. She was a World YWCA delegate and also a woman living with HIV. So Sylvia is from Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea, and she's a leader in her community advocating for the rights of women living with HIV. Sylvia's journey as a woman living with HIV was strongly impacted by stigma and discrimination, particularly that which plagues HIV-positive people in PNG, which has already been discussed somewhat tonight. So when Sylvia was diagnosed with HIV herself, along with her then 3-year-old son, her husband became violent and abusive and accused her of adultery. He refused to be tested himself, but was later diagnosed with HIV also. Due to a lack of emergency accommodation and women's refuges in PNG, Sylvia remains unable to escape that cycle of domestic violence and abuse in her home. Despite this, she's determined to better the outcomes for women living with HIV in her community, and sees her involvement with YWCA PNG as integral to that goal, as well as attending AIDS 2014. I interviewed Sylvia for an article I wrote during the conference for Women's Agenda online, and she said, "I think that for me to come here, it really helps a lot in many ways. I want to help women living positively in PNG to have the privilege to speak on behalf of themselves and to help them advocate for better conditions and empower them, like how the YWCA has done for me." She went on to say, and I think this is really important, "At this conference, many people are talking about HIV, but I think they need to try to leave their comfort zone, come down to the level where the grassroots are, to where people are really feeling the pain and see how they are living." I think that Sylvia's story resonates a lot with many women living with HIV and all people living with HIV in communities where the stigma and discrimination associated with AIDS are significant barriers to testing, treatment and quality of life. Learning about her circumstances and hearing from many other people living with HIV throughout the conference gave me a much deeper perspective of the social and cultural issues that exacerbate the impact of HIV/AIDS on communities than what I had before. And for me, that was definitely the biggest highlight of attending AIDS 2014. In addition to this, while many of the scientific presentations flew straight over my head, it was really exciting and heartening to hear about the innovation in treatment methods, the ongoing research into more effective testing, and the reduction that we've seen in mother-to-child transmissions over the past several years. But also one aspect of the conference that really stood out for me was the global village. It was a space where community organisations, activists, cultural groups and more came together to share their work and their knowledge, and there were several arts and photography exhibitions throughout the global village. One in particular really stood out for me. It was called The Greying of AIDS, Stories from an Ageing Pandemic, and it featured photos and oral stories of HIV-positive people aged 50 and older. I think the exhibition really raised awareness of the fact that HIV infection is no longer a death sentence, and that social outcomes for older people living with HIV, however, can be quite low, especially at retirement age when funds in a lot of countries for treatment aren't allocated to those age groups. And I felt like the exhibition put a face on that issue and reminded me again that HIV/AIDS is a global issue that affects so many demographics in unique ways, and a holistic approach is the only real way to fighting the epidemic. AIDS 2014 brought together a really wide range of perspectives and provided space and opportunity for us to explore these issues as a community. I feel very grateful to have been able to attend, and thank you guys for letting me share my experiences tonight. I'd also just like to briefly thank YWCA Australia, World YWCA and YWCA Canberra for making my attendance possible, and a really big thank you to the AIDS Action Council, ACT, and Marcus in particular for inviting me tonight, but also for giving me valuable advice on how to approach a conference of this magnitude without burning out, and being a really friendly face at the conference itself. If anyone is interested, a lot of the delegates who came down with World YWCA shared their particular stories on our Women Leading Change blog, which you can find through the World YWCA website. And if you'd like to learn any more about YWCA Canberra and the work that we do, I'd be very happy to chat to you about that in the conference after. Thanks very much.